I
I just
apologize
started
for.
the recording for you.
Oh, you did? Thank you,
Yeah,
Diana.
yeah.
Thank you
Now
so much,
it's
Diana.
over.
You can send it to me later. And anything, is there anything that you would like to share before I start asking you these questions?
Uh,
What did I leave out?
you, I think you're right. The Darièn Gap, which is where I have been working mostly for the last 5 years, is a stretch of jungle without any kind of road or path connecting Colombia and Panama. That means like it's the connection between South America and Central America. And there are migrants from more than 100 countries crossing that jungle in order to cross Central America and made it to the United States.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with my usual question, which is when you graduated from high school, Federico, what did you think you were going to do? What did you think you were going to be?
Well, I never graduated from high school. It's a funny story, and it's funny that you asked that question because I was in high school and I was willing to become a photographer. And for my father, that was uh, not a decent choice for a living. My father is an academic, but we were living in a very small city in Colombia. So
Yes.
basically, my father kicked me out of my house because I was willing to become a photographer. And he told me like, if you want to be a photographer, you gotta leave this house and you gotta leave the house now. And then I told him like, yeah, I want to be a photographer. So I left the house and I had to start working because I was not able to afford my college. And uh, and that's like that was the beginning of my career, basically.
Whew. And what little town in Colombia were you from?
It's a Manizales. It's a small city in the Coffee Triangle in the mountains. It's a city of 500,000 inhabitants. It's a very small city in the mountains.
Oh, wow. And so, did you get to talk to your parents after that? Now that you're a famous photographer, did they talk to you?
So I'm not famous. Well, it was like a very broken, complete relation for 2 3 years, and after that, they start seeing that I was able to like pay my expenses through photography. Then we start talking back again, and now we're like a very close family. And both my father and my mother are very big fans of my work. Uh, and also, I think it's interesting. I don't talk about that with sadness or like any kind of bad feeling. I just think, uh, as far as my father was able to see in that time, he was worried that I was not going to make enough money to pay my rent and my expenses, and he was worried about
He was
me.
worried about you. Yeah,
Um, yeah, he would. Yeah. So that's why he was trying to put me back on track to find a decent career and a decent job that could make me a living. And he was not sure how I was going to do that through photography. Um, so he was trying to protect me, and I take it that way.
wonderful. Thank you for answering such a personal question, but I was really curious, and that's part of why I always do these workshops or speakers forums. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you first started working on the Darien Gap. In other words, did it just open up to you, or was it something of interest, or were you living near the area? What brought you into doing the photography in the Darien Gap?
Well, that's a very long story, and I think it goes back to 2013. Uh, I was working in Colombia for a while for a news agency, and Hugo Chavez died in Venezuela. So I got this phone call. Hugo Chavez just died, and I run. I
Uh-huh.
left everything. I picked my cameras. I take a plane to Caracas. I landed in Caracas, and I was photographing the people mourning the Hugo Chavez. One
And
month
Caracas is
later,
Venezuela.
Nic-
Yeah.
Caracas is Venezuela. Yes, it's like a 2 hour flight from Bogota. Uh, 1 month later, I was photographing the election of Nicolas Maduro,
Ah,
and 2 or 3 years after that, I was photographing Venezuelans walking into Colombia. It was a big wave of Venezuelans leaving their country on foot, trying to go to Colombia, and I was documenting all that because basically these people were walking out of their country and coming into a different country with nothing but the things they were wearing, nothing else. Um, 1 year later, I was photographing Venezuelans going to the south, to Brazil. These were mostly indigenous people who was living in the Orinoco Delta. The Orinoco is the biggest river in
right,
Venezuela, and they were heading south and entering Brazil. And it was even more complex because when the Venezuelans were coming to Colombia, they spoke the same language. But with the now indigenous people going to Brazil, their first language was the native tongue, and the Spanish for the second language. And they were not so fluent in Spanish, but also they were crossing to Brazil. And the language there is Portuguese, and they were like zero. Um, they spoke zero Portuguese, so it was much more complex for them. And I was photographing that those migrations for several years. Then the COVID started in 2020. And with the COVID, it was a very particular situation because there was a lot of Venezuelans who were living in other countries of Latin America outside Venezuela. That, and they were hit it very hard by COVID because the economy collapsed. Many of them were working in the red light or the supermarket, a grocery store, gas station, things like that. And there was no people in the street, so they were like broken and without any possibility of income. So they started walking back into their country. So there was a big wave of Venezuelans walking back to Venezuela from all Latin America, and I was documenting that. And then in 2021, the president of Haiti got killed. So
uh-huh,
I went to Haiti to document the aftermath of how the Iceland was like, yeah, in a very complex moment. Was turmoil all around the island, and I was in Haiti, and I suddenly start learning from Haitians that other Haitians who have left Haiti 10 years before because of the earthquake, and they were living in South America, they were trying to migrate north. So I came back from Haiti straight to the Darièn Gap at the end of 2021 to found thousands of Haitians trying to cross the Darièn Gap. And there was just a few months before it became a highway of people crossing the Darièn Gap. And I start coming once and again and again and again. And it was very fast. The numbers were growing very fast. And the Venezuelans were the majority of them. So that flux of people start crossing the jungle. So in 2020, 21, it was like 124,000 people who crossed the jungle. In 2022, it was over 2,500 people. In 2023, it was 540,000 people. In
oh,
2024, the number drops down a little bit. It was 2,080,000 to 280,000 people. And now I am right now at the exit of the Darien Gap in the Panama jungle, and there was just 12 people who crossed yesterday the jungle.
ouch. Yeah, it's gone down quite a bit. Yeah. Oh, do you
It's gone
have photo?
down,
Yeah.
and it's no,
No,
sorry.
please, please, please. No, go ahead.
It has goes down like really fast, and there's like basically just a few people like less than a dozen people crossing daily right now, but there's like a contraflux of people. There's people traveling south instead of traveling north. There was people who was all around Central America willing to go north. And after Trump got into the presidency, then these people just um, abort their idea of head north and start coming back to the south.
Is what's the most challenging? Maybe you could describe, because a lot of people don't know about the Darièn Gap. In fact, I asked a group where the Darièn Gap was, and they said it's in the Ukraine. And I said, excuse me. And so, would you be willing to share what are some of the challenges that the families have going through the Darièn Gap, and what you see as the major challenges for them, and what were the major challenges for you as well?
Well, I think
Doing
I
photography in that area.
well, I think like the Darièn Gap is a mountain, it's a jungle. So I think there are two things that are very beautiful in pictures and movies, very threatening in real life, and it's like the jungle and the snow. So it's like every time like every time people see the snow in a movie, it looks so beautiful, you know. And with the jungle is the same. It looks beautiful because you're in front of a screen. Once you're in the jungle, there's humidity, mosquitoes, snakes, jaguars, mud. Uh, if it's just if it's sunny, it's just too sunny. You can get dehydrated like really fast. If it's rainy, then you're wet all day, and it's nothing to do with that. And all the equipment is wet, humid, and most of the time it's getting broke because of the environment. So it's very hostile. It's really hostile. To cross the jungle between Colombia and Panama, it means you need to hike a mountain and come down. The mountain is about 600 meters above sea level. So that's kind of a professional task for a hiker, you know. And there's a lot of people I have seen, old people. I have seen babies within, I don't know, 1 month, 2 months, uh, crossing the jungle. Families carrying their very newborn babies, and it's really complex. Uh, as it's a mountain, when you're walking up or down, it just rain on top of the hills. The rivers tend to grow really fast, so it's like an avalanche, and nobody really knows when it's coming. So there's a lot of people who have drowned in the Darien Gap, and there's also the human factor of risk, which means there are gangs and criminals all in both sides of the border, all around the Darien Gap, and so there's a lot of people who are like assaulted, robbed. There's a lot of people who got raped, and there's a lot of people who got killed. And
It's,
I think those are the biggest risk for migrants. You know, physically it's very challenging. I think migration has also a very complex challenge. Like when you think about like the emotional challenge and the mental health situation for migrants is really bad because nobody's taking care of it. Um, and I think those are kind of the biggest challenge of migration. And for me, I mean, as a journalist, as a photographer, it's complex to understand that I'm trying to photograph people who's going through these circumstances. It's like these people are having the worst day of their life, and there's a photographer in front. Uh, so I try to be very careful with my work and work within a very strict ethic frame and try to understand the situation of the people in front of my camera. I don't photograph people who doesn't want to be photographed. I don't photograph people who I don't know their names first. I always try to proceed in a very careful way, trying to think about who's in front of me.
Thank you for that. That's really you're describing. You're sort of you're holding a vision so that people can be educated about what is really happening there for people who don't know anything about what's happening and the struggles that people go through to get through to the Darièn Gap to get to better life for them. They hoped for a better life. And I'm wondering if did you bring any photographs or did you bring anything that you wanted to share with this group?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't. It's like as I'm telling you right now, I am in the Darièn Gap right now. Like, let me show you some of this. Like,
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you.
this is the car I was riding. This is basically the jungle,
Whoa.
and in front of me is a very very um nice guy. So the one in the green shirt is Carlos, who's my driver, and the other guy just offered us a coffee. It's like the place. It's supposed to be like the place is closed. It's a very small store by the road. It's like a restaurant or something, but it's closed because there are no migrants anymore. There's nobody anymore. So we stopped here because it was like time for the meeting, our scheduled meeting, and then this guy just offered us a coffee, and I'm just sitting here doing conference on my phone.
You're in the moment. You definitely are in the moment.
Yeah,
What else do
yeah.
you want people to know about? What else is important for them to know?
Well, I think it's very important to point. I know somebody raised their hand. Let me just answer this, and now I'll go back to somebody who
Oh,
has a
sure.
question.
Go
I
ahead.
think it's
If somebody raised their hand, go ahead and say, let's go ahead and do that if somebody has their hand up and wanted to ask a
yeah,
question.
yeah. Let, let me answer these, and let's go back there.
Sure.
It's very important for people to understand that there is people from over 100 nationalities crossing the Darièn Gap. Mm. There is about
We lost your voice. We lost your voice, Federico.
I'm here.
There, now we
I
can
am
hear you.
okay. Sorry. There is 205 countries in the world, and people from 100 nationalities is crossing the Darièn Gap. So that's a very easy way to understand that people from all over the world is coming to South America to cross the Darièn Gap and then cross all Central America by foot to go to the United States. There's people from Africa, Middle East, Asia, even people from China who is flying from China to Ecuador in the south of Colombia. And they are using buses from Ecuador to Colombia, and then they are walking through the jungle. And they after the jungle is the hell is not over after the jungle. They have to walk Panama, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, Mexico before making it to the United States. So it's a very long, very, very long path for an Afghan leaving Afghanistan, flying to Brazil, going to Colombia, crossing the Darien Gap, crossing all Central America, and making it to the United States, can take up to 6 months and cost more than $15,000. It's very expensive, and it's a very big investment in time, which means the people who's doing this is desperate. This is the last resource for these people. This is not people trying to improve their lives a little bit better. I think this kind of migration is very different from the migration from Central America. And I'm not trying to put like things on a scale because it's not a scale, but it's different. Like there's a lot of Mexicans who are like a fluctuant population coming there and going back, you know. And some people stays, some people just want to go there, work, and come back. From somebody from I don't know Mali, Somalia, Ghana, Afghanistan, Iran, China, Bangladesh. This is like one-way route. They go there, and they know also they're not going to be full citizens. They don't care. They just don't. Because even being an undocumented citizen in the United States, for them, sometimes is better than staying in their home countries. Some people is fleeing religious persecution. Some people is fleeing political violence. Some people is fleeing hunger. Mm, but all them are looking for freedom. Somebody has hand raised.
Hi,
There's
Federico. This is Shireen Connery. I had my hand raised. Thank you so much for the work that you do and making all of us aware. I just recently read that some of the undocumented people from the U.S. are getting sent to remote camps in Panama and Costa Rica, and then that way they don't have to, the laws of the U.S., they don't have to follow those for taking care of these undocumented people. And I was wondering, are you familiar with, and it's from all those countries you name, Afghanistan, Iran, India, China, and these people are desperate. They can't go back to their home countries. And now they're going into these remote camps in Panama in the jungle. And I'm just wondering who's taking care of them, what kind of laws apply to them. I don't know if you're aware of that. I just recently read, and it just really it was disturbing to me that this is the way we're treating the people here. So
Beau- thank you, Shireen. Thank you. It makes me. I'm not laughing at the situation. I'm laughing that probably you have been like reading my reports because I'm the journalist. I'm part of the team who's
yes,
reporting about that for the New York Times. So if you look
yes,
carefully at the
probably.
pictures, those are my photos from Panama City. Like we were like 10 days trying to find that because the American government and the Panamanian government was trying. They were both trying to hide that. So we broke the news. We did that scope like 4 days ago. Uh,
I just read in the
the
New York
American
Times, I
government,
think so. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for
So
that
the
work
American
again.
government
Thank
sent.
you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for reading the New York Times. The American government and the Panamanian government they signed a deal. The American government sent 3 planes with deported migrants to Panama. There's about 300 migrants on those planes. And first, they were taken to a hotel in Panama City, and they were held inside the hotel, and it was impossible for anybody to contact them. Like they had zero contact with the outside world. There are lawyers who are claiming that's illegal because these migrants were not granted to see a lawyer or a human rights worker. Um, and basically, Julie Turkowitz, who is my partner, and me, like working partner, I mean, and me, we were standing outside of the hotel uh, because the local authorities were forbidding us to go closer or access the hotel. And we were standing outside of the hotel, and we wrote our phone numbers, our WhatsApp numbers in very large piece of paper, and we put it in the floor, and we start contacting people from these migration groups. And these migrants have, some of them have iPhones, so they start contacting us, and we start photographing them and talking to them. And the situation is really complex. So they split the group in two. There's one group who agree to go back to their countries, which means being deported from Panama to their home countries. And there are 105 other people who are claiming that if they go back to their home country, they're going to be killed or jailed for life. So basically, they were moved to Darièn Gap, and that's part of the reason why I'm here. Uh, because they are basically kept hiding in a camp in the middle of the jungle, far from anybody's eyes.
And there's kids in there. I read there was an 8-year-old boy. It's just unbelievable.
There are eight minors in the group.
Federico, we
Just
lost
Yeah,
your photograph.
well,
There you
thank
go.
you again for
I'm,
bringing
I'm
attention
back.
to that. to that. Thank you
Thank you,
for
Sharon.
you and your
Thank you,
coworkers
Sharon.
for all the work that you do.
There's another
Thank
question
you.
in the
If you,
chat that,
yeah,
no, go ahead. I'm so sorry,
no,
Federico, go ahead.
that if you go to my Instagram account, you can find some of these and some of the most recent coverage of whole situation. My Instagram is at Historias Sencillas, so it should be easy to find. Uh,
What
if
will,
you want to see some pictures, because I didn't bring anything,
yeah,
sorry.
what we'll do, no worries. What we'll do is next week, we'll send any photographs that you'd like to share and any follow-up notes or names of your books so that people who weren't able to come can see the recording and also get the information that you didn't have a chance to share today. One of the
Thank you.
questions is, why is it that photographs of the Darièn Gap are not usually shown by media? Thanks for your great work, much appreciated. And there's a heart underneath it.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, it's really hard to get to the Darièn Gap. It's very hard to make it here. Really hard. I have crossed the Darièn Gap, I don't know, but more than 5 times. But it's really like physically, emotionally, it's very demanding. So it's not easy to send somebody here. The risk is too high, I guess, you know. Second, then once the risk is that high, when you have a photographer on the ground and you're like, I don't know, the New York Times, like we have published more, I don't know, more than 10 articles, 20 articles about the Darièn Gap, maybe even more than 20. And some media has also published many articles about it. But it's not like a constant coverage of the situation. I gotta say, it's like from the news perspective, it's a very complex time, a very, very complex time. And it's like every time you're doing one thing, then somebody doing something else, or and it's like we were in Panama covering all these situations with the 300 deportees from the United States to Panama, which doesn't make sense at all. And we came here, and while that was happening, the White House published a picture of the president with a crown, which is something complex, like, I don't know, it's like I would like the media paying more attention to things like this. But at the same time, I have to say, the media I'm working for, the New York Times, is working really hard to get to send me here and to publish the pieces I'm doing, and yeah, so it's a very complex balance.
I'm going to open it up to questions right now. So if anybody on the call would like to ask Federico a question, this is your time to unmute yourself and ask him.
Sure, I'll go
Somebody,
first.
go ahead, please.
Hi, it's Alex from Northern California. I wonder, how
Hello,
do
Alex.
you approach the people when you first want to take their picture? What do you say?
Yeah. Working in the Darièn Gap, basically, I do not approach nobody. I'm walking in the jungle with a flow of migrants, like 1,000, 2,000 migrants. And I just start walking, and I have 2 cameras hanging from my neck. So I don't approach people. People approach me, asking me, who are you and why are you here? And I told them, I'm Federico, I'm a photographer, I'm Colombian. I work for the New York Times. I'm here to document the situation, the humanitarian situation at the Darièn Gap. And then we start having conversation. And then I start taking like lots of pictures. I usually first I take the pictures people wants to see for themselves. Because I think that's different from the people from the pictures I'm looking for and the newspaper is looking for. it's very interesting, but even in the hardest moments, like crossing the Darièn Gap full of mud, almost dehydrated with no food and very few hope. When people see a photographer, they hang and they do like this and they smile. And I shot those pictures, and usually I send those pictures to the people. Then I keep photographing people, I keep photographing and I keep talking to take them to the point where they forgot there's a photographer in front of them and they still posing. So it's a matter of time and also connection. I always explain to the people what I'm doing. I always explain to the people where my picture's going to go and going to be published. And I always explain to the people how big is the audience of New York Times and how big can like my audience could be. So people is pretty aware about where the photographs are going. I think from a photographer perspective, one of the hardest things to do in photography is learn how to use the delete button on the camera, because that's really hard. Once you have a good picture, if somebody asks you to delete that picture, it's really hard to let it go. But I think the Darièn Gap has taught me that lesson. So I had no problems deleting pictures. I was on top of a hill and there was this very old woman walking out the hill. She has like wood batons on every hand, and she was full surrounded with people trying to help her because she was very, very old. I don't know, maybe 75, maybe 80. White hair. She had a long dress, sweating a lot. And I was photographing this older woman. And I was thinking while I was photographing, because it's like this is how photographers' brain works. I was thinking this is a very compelling photo. This photo is going to tell the story of the people crossing the Darièn Gap, which is not like the idea of criminals invading the United States, but a very old lady with gray hair escaping. And she crossed next to me and she was so exhausted that she was not able to talk. Immediately I realized that the woman and the people who were surrounding the woman, they did not speak Spanish or English, but a different language. So it was easy to understand that they were not from Latin America. And then a young guy approached me and he was very shy and very like humble. And he was asking me to delete the pictures. He told me, look, I know this is your work. I know you're a journalist, but that's my grandmother. And we're playing from Afghanistan. And because of the heat, because of the humidity, and because of the rain, my grandmother doesn't have the head cover. So it would be a dishonor and a disgrace for she and all the family if you publish that photo of my grandmother like that. And I knew I knew I had a very good photo. I knew I had a photo for the cover of the New York Times. But I think there's no photo that is worth to go over somebody's dignity. Try to let the photo.
Thank you, Federico. There's another question from Linda. Linda, do you want to unmute yourself and say hi?
Hello, and thank you so much for meeting with us today. I'm calling from Minnesota, so very, very different climate than where you are right now. About a year ago, we had a multifamily fire where a house was destroyed, and there was about 20 people in the home, and they were all undocumented individuals, and nobody spoke English. Only one person had any documentation to help them get a new place to live, and we actually found some really great resources for them. We had to find some interpreters because they were speaking a dialect that wasn't just strictly Spanish.
Wow.
And one of the individuals that was working with them and could translate and talk to them, is certain that three people actually had come there through the Darièn Gap because of how they had traveled and where they had come from. They didn't say Darièn Gap, but there's no way that wouldn't have been included in their journey. And it was, they walked like exactly what you're saying from Colombia up to California and then came through California to Minnesota. And the fire was bad, scary, and it was very clear that it had added trauma to one individual. And this one woman was really struggling, understandably. I mean, I can't even imagine going through that journey. You get there, and it was 2 days after they arrived that their home or the place they were staying burned down, and they were going to need to find new housing. So horrible, just heart-wrenching. Do you have any recommendations through your experience of how to approach these individuals, connect with them, things that should be like that was a perfect story of photographing the woman and the grandson saying, please don't take a picture, send that picture out there. That would be humiliating for the family and her. Anything that we should be aware of to be compassionate. I mean, I'm thinking, here I am, I've been born and raised in Minnesota. I have no idea of these cultures or what they've gone through. I can't even relate to that experience, that would be helpful to relate to them or be aware of. Or, I mean, we found I think they were from Ecuador, and we found a restaurant that we were able to get food brought in that was comfort food and they were familiar with, they were all so appreciative of that. It was amazing. But anything else that you recommend of ideas of how to be caring towards these people after such a traumatic situation? And I do understand that each person's journey is their own and individual to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nancy, for sharing the situation. And I think the question is very important. I don't have like a magic answer for that,
Okay.
but like at least for Latin American people, for Latin American migrants, there's a very common say, and they used to say, it's hard, but it's not impossible, which means they made it and they are glad to made it. But at the same time, it covers how big is the toll they paid for it. And the toll is emotional and mental health toll. So in the outside, like if you take a look at the Instagrams and social media of most of the migrants who made it, what you're gonna see is happy moments, like people sharing that they made it and that they're happy. But I think it's important to have always in mind first that most of the migrants, most of them, are not able to return to their homes. That's something really, really, really complex to think about. They're not going to be back at the block. Or they're not going to see the people who was left behind. If they left the grandmother, they're not going to see the grandmother ever again, or a cousin, or the best friend, the bar they used to hang around, or the street, or anything of that. Most of Venezuelans, they just can't go back to their country. And thinking about Latin America, if you're thinking about the Africans or something like that, it's even worse. If you think about the Chinese people, it's even worse. And I think that's very important to have in mind, because it's like, yeah, just like unplugging yourself from the reality you grow in, and then plugging yourself with a different reality that you have been told is a happy one, and that therefore you're not allowed to have like emotional ups and downs. So I have seen migrants telling all the migrants, like, you wanted to live in the States, so this is like living in the States. So you better be happy because now you made it. Like you get to live the American dream. And it's like, no, man. It's like you can have your ups and downs, you can have your emotional struggle, and it's yours and it's personal, and that's it. You were mentioning comforting food, and I think that's very important. You know, it's like we all grew up in a very small groups of society. So what comforting food for you means is different from comforting food for them, and it's different for comforting food for me, of course. So I think it's important to understand that, to understand the little differences, you know. And one of the reasons people migrate, of course, like this idea of the United States being the land of freedom, is important. The incomes are very important. There's something I call the McDonald's effect. You know that there are McDonald's all over the world. You would be amazed if you try to compare the income of a McDonald's worker in New York or California with a McDonald's worker in Caracas or Brazil or Colombia. So, and they are all doing basically the same, but the income is very, 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 there's a big gap of income. And the other thing is, one of the reasons why people migrate is to the States, to the United States, I mean, is because they can find a sense of community there. You know, you can go to the Haiti, the little Colombia, little, you know, those little every country, even in places like Latin America, when you have different cultures inside within one country, uh, you go and you find people from the same community living in the same neighborhood. So I think that's important, you know, and that gives the migrant that sense of community heart, you know. So it's important for them. Thank you for asking and pointing that out. I think that's very important.
We were able to connect them with the embassy. And then we were able to, it was extremely educational experience because to try to help them get the documents they needed to become documented in the United States, to get the birth certificates. There was some roundabout way, and we were contacted with somebody who is down in Ecuador and Colombia who can go in and get, it's like a birth book. And
Yeah.
they were able to help us and send it back, where you can't just go online and do it yourself. Like we couldn't just go on the internet and access it. And so we found a lot of resources in the process. But it was, you know, thank you for photographing what is happening there, because it was amazing. We did send somebody to a dentist and didn't speak English. And unfortunately, the gentleman got very confused about Uber. We had somebody to pick him up and he missed the Uber. We were terrified that we lost the person, and he walked
Wow.
2 hours, 3 hours back to the shelter and found his way somehow. We don't even know how he got back. It was terrifying. We were driving around trying to find him. But yeah, thank you again for all that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
I was just going to mention, imagine any one of us here in the United States having to move to a different country, not knowing the language, not knowing the transportation system, not knowing where to get groceries, not knowing how to register their children for education or how to get health services. And imagine having lost or let go of everything that's home and familiar and families and friends to try a new life. And I think one of the things that touched off by what you said, Federico, and what Lindsay was talking about is one of the gifts that we can give. We always have this little voice in our head about how we're going to help people while they're telling you their story rather than truly listening. And I think being able to tell their story as often as they want or need to is really important. It's like holding vigil to what's going on with them and honoring them with dignity, that what they have to say and what they experienced is something very human and part of the fabric of humanity. So what I would say is you've touched off a whole bunch of things in my mind that may support people. If you can imagine yourself being in that, how would you like to be treated? And that story of being lost in the middle of a city is so terrifying because one, you don't know the transportation system, you don't know where to go to get help, and you don't know how to in a language that's totally foreign to you. Imagine you're put in Afghanistan or you're put in South America and you don't speak Spanish, or you don't speak Farsi, how do you support yourself and your family? So I wanted to
Yeah,
say that. I think it's really important. Um, any other
please.
questions for Federico?
I just have a comment.
Yeah,
Um,
who's speaking now? I'm
hey,
sorry. Oh, okay. Hey, hi.
hi. What I find often in dealing with these kind of situations is that for a lot of the families that I deal with, um, the most important thing I offer them is just caring. The fact that someone cares means a lot to someone who has nothing and is sort of struggling to figure out what's the next step they're going to take. And just having someone to listen and help them figure out what's the plan.
Thank you, Kay.
You.
Other questions or comments that you want to have for Federico? We've held him captive here in the middle of nowhere to be able to support us in finding out what's going on.
No, Jill, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to all of you. I gotta
You
keep
have
going
72
on
on
my
the
journey.
call.
I have
You have
no, thank you. Thank you all for attending the call.
no,
I gotta go. I have like 1 more hour probably before arriving to a small town where I'm gonna be sleeping in the jungle. So thank you.
this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you for
no,
inviting me here, and thank you everybody for
no.
coming.
Of course, but if anybody has any last minute, we have 3 or 4 minutes. You have any last minute questions for Federico before he has to take off on his journey?
I don't have a
Thank
question.
you.
Frederica, sorry.
Oh,
Go
Go
sorry.
ahead.
ahead.
I don't have a question, but I thank you for your courage.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
Gianna. Thank you.
Frederica, this is Diane. How can we help you be your voice here? What can we do?
I think my way to help is journalism and art. I think my way to help is to document these people. I truly believe that documenting their journeys, documenting their lives, and documenting their experiences is the best way I can help. So if you help me spread their experiences, if you help me spread the pictures of these people, if you help me spread the stories and the images of these people, I think that would help them. But my idea here when you ask me that question, Diane, is not to think about how can I be helped, can but how can you help me
Help
help
them.
these
Yep.
people? And I think like yeah, spreading the word, spreading their experiences. I think that's the best we can do. Telling the real stories of these migrants who are first fleeing very dramatic conditions, but second, trying to make it to the United States to work hard, pay taxes,
Mhm.
and raise their kids, and put like food on their tables and a roof over their heads, and and a job and things like that. Like I have heard lots of stories. Like I have seen doctors, lawyers, any kind of people crossing the Darièn Gap on food just because they want a new and better life, even if they have to give out on their expectations of having to work as a lawyer and they
Mhm.
had to work as a Uber driver or whatever it is, like cleaning, or cooking, fast food, whatever it is. Like they are really hard workers, and I think the numbers are also there to support these ideas. Like this is not just a random empathic idea. This is supported by facts and supported by numbers. The amount of crimes committed in the United States, for example, by undocumented population is going down. It's lower
Mhm.
than ever. I think that's important to tell. That's a very important story to tell because xenophobia and aporophobia
Yeah.
are like spreading really fast. And I think
Mm.
like the way to combat that is to understand how important is migration. Like I have never read in any history book about a society who was collapsed by migration. But as a matter of fact, I have seen and read in history books how the arts, the culture, the food, the societies, everything flourish, everything blossom when there's migration.
Yeah.
And of course, economy does it too, because then you have more people, you have more working force, you have more people producing. So the economies flourish
Right.
too with migration. So it's like the anti-migration speech. I think it's not popular, but it's easy to combat by telling the truth of who is these people. Like people who can walk 3 hours back to their place even when they don't know the language.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you. Please be safe.
Yes, and you have a
Thank you.
million thank yous in the chat, but somebody just
No.
said, congratulations on being a finalist on Photography Book of the Year. I don't know if you knew that,
Yeah.
but I just found that out.
Yeah. Yeah. I post that on my Instagram account. So thank you for that.
And the
Yeah.
only parting shot I would like to say is I thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And please send me any notes, any photographs, anything that you want the people that weren't here today or people that you didn't get to see the photographs today to send. We'll send out an email next week and we'll send a copy of it to you so you know what we sent. And I just want to thank
Thank
you,
you,
and I
Jill.
want
Thank you
to
very
welcome
much.
you next year to come back and visit us. Yeah. And you can light
I
on my
will. Yeah.
doorstep in California any moment you want. You always have a
Thank you.
welcome invitation. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would love to go there. Thanks.
Federico, gracias por todo. Muchísimas gracias. Anything else? Somebody just I have to say this last parting shot. Somebody said, my grandparents were immigrants escaping fascism, and I count my blessings that they were not turned away. That was the last
Yeah.
chat in the chat. Goodbye,
No, it's like
Federico.
we
Stay
are
steady where you're
most of.
going today. And thank
Thank
your
you.
driver
Thank
for
you.
waiting
Bye.
so long.
Thank you for inviting me. I will tell him. Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. Goodbye, Federico.
Bye.
Bye.